So it was just a couple weeks before Christmas, and I got a call from the casting director. Called me, not my agent, called me directly and said, Todd Phillips picked your headshot out of a pile of headshots and wants you to play this part.
Wow.
And I was like, well, when's the audition?
Yeah.
You know, because I was going home to Boston to see my parents for Christmas. And they're like, no, you don't get it. No audition. We want you to go to this wardrobe fitting. They need to put you in a tuxedo, and you'll film, January 3rd through the 6th or whatever it was. It was like 4 days. And I was like, and I'm thinking, wow.
Today we are joined by Jami Philbrick. Jami has acted in a few comedies that I really enjoy, including American Pie, Old School, and Boogie Nights. He's also worked in the editorial department on several movies and is currently the editor-in-chief for Moviefone. And I have to ask, I know you're the one usually doing the interviews. Have you ever been interviewed like this before?
I have. I've been on a couple of podcasts, and I've done a little bit. First of all, hi, thank you, Benjamin. Nice to see you, and thank you for inviting me to the show.
I should have done that part
you're
first.
Fine. That's my hosting coming out. So yeah, no, and I mean, I'm comfortable talking about myself, but it is a little interesting being on the other side because day after day, what I do for a living is interview actors and filmmakers about their movies and TV projects, and so it's always a little interesting to then be talking about yourself. I feel like I'm a little bit not worthy of talking about my career, but I'm happy to do it here at this forum.
Oh, I'm very much looking forward to it. And yeah, I mean, of course, thank you very much for coming on the show. It goes without saying. I really do appreciate your time and really looking forward to the discussion. So you've worked on several films through the years in many capacities. Is there a favorite film that you've worked on?
Ooh. Well, I guess so. I came to LA to be an actor and did the acting thing for about 10 years. And then, I was a terrible waiter. So having a day job as a waiter or bartender wasn't really an option for me. And I went to Emerson College, and my roommate in Emerson College, give a shout out to David Berman. He knew from the first day I met him that he wanted to be an editor. And fast forward 10 years later after college, and the acting thing wasn't really working out for me, or I wasn't satisfied with where it was going. I was looking for some work, and he was working on a movie called The Clearing, which starred Robert Redford, Willem Dafoe, and Helen Mirren. He was a apprentice editor at that point, and they needed a PA for the office, editorial production assistant, and asked me if I'd be interested. And I was sort of at a crossroads at that point. So I agreed to do it. And that was a great experience. And then the editor on that film is a fantastic editor, Oscar-nominated editor named Kevin Tent. And he is Alexander Payne's editor. He has cut every movie Alexander Payne has ever cut. So when The Clearing ended, Kevin was going to start Alexander's next movie, which happened to be Sideways, and brought David and myself along. And so I would say Sideways, at least as far as working in post-production, Sideways absolutely was my favorite experience. And I had an interesting job during production. My job while we were filming was basically we set up editorial in LA. And so they would shoot all day in Santa Barbara. They rented me a car. And in the afternoon, I would drive from LA to Santa Barbara. Actually, I think sometimes I drive all the way to Santa Barbara. Sometimes a PA from the set would meet me like in Ventura County, halfway. And we would switch off. So I would give them the dailies that Kevin had just cut for Alexander to look at from what they had shot the day before. And the PA would hand me over the film. Remember, this is back in 2003. Even at that point, most filmmakers were going over to video at that point, but Alexander was still on film. Sideways was shot completely on 35. And so I would take the film stock and then drive it to Photochem in Burbank, drop it off, sometimes quite late. And then my first stop in the morning would be to pick up the film from Photochem, take it to Kevin, he'd cut the dailies, and then we do that whole process all over again. So that was a very exciting 2.5 months. And sometimes I got to drive all the way to the set, stay on set. Interestingly, there was one night that was a night shoot. If you know Sideways, it was the scene at the mother's house. They go to Miles's mother's, Paul Giamatti's character, Miles's house, to visit his mother on the way to Santa Barbara. And so that was a night shoot. So the film wasn't going to be ready until 2 or 3 in the morning. And so they put me up at a place. They said, you can come to set and then you can just stay in Santa Barbara that night. This was a Friday. So it did, they had the weekend off, so I could take the photo, the stock to Photochem the next morning. And I did not realize this. This is a little fun fact. I did not realize this while I was there. I didn't realize it until I think I saw the first cut of the movie a couple months later. That the room that they rented for me to stay that night in Santa Barbara is actually the room that Paul and Thomas stay in the movie. They had rented that hotel for the entire shoot because if there was a rain day, if there was a day that was raining and they had to postpone what they were going to shoot outside, they could just move and shoot, because they had that room rented for like 3 months. So I stayed in that, in the actual room. And then actually I didn't realize they were shooting something the next day at the bar that was it was like an exterior shot of it wasn't even Alexander. It was like, a unit team, right? So they shot an exterior of the bar, and my rental car was parked. As you can see, my rental car in the movie. And then, so last year, during award season, I was invited to I'm a member of the Critics' Choice Association. I'm a voting member. And so, during award season, they'll have these parties where they kind of invite the critics to sort of schmooze with the talent and kind of drum up interest in voting for that movie, which with the holdovers I didn't have to do because I already loved it. And it was one of my favorite movies of last year. But I went to this party and I knew Kevin was going to be there and Alexander and Paul Giamatti as well, because even the holdovers was a bit of a Sideways reunion with the cast, and Alexander uses the same crew from movie to movie. And so I was reminiscing with Kevin and Alexander, and I told him that story, and Kevin was like, "Oh, you got to go tell Giamatti that story." And I was like, I don't know that Giamatti cares. And he's like, no, go tell him. So I went over, introduced, and I've interviewed Paul over the years in my other job, as a journalist, and met him during, the making of the movie, but I was just a PA. I didn't think he was going to remember me. And I went up, and he was so nice, and I told him the story about, and he was like, "You mean Fox Searchlight wouldn't rent you a room? They just gave you our room? How cheap was that?" And I just thought I was like, "Nah, I was a 20-year-old kid. I didn't care." But yeah, Sideways, it's funny, and I always say this, and I don't even think I realized this until I started working in post-production, but like, no one sets out to make a bad movie. Everyone is trying to make the best movie they can when they're making a movie. And I worked on movies, like Sideways that were nominated for Best Picture. And I worked on movies like All About Steve that was nominated for Best Razzie. So, but the same people that made All About Steve, they were trying to make a great movie, as were Sideways. So, but it was interesting. I do remember one of the first times I saw the dailies come back from Sideways, I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be a big movie. This is going to be an Oscar movie. I sort of just knew that. Yeah. And there have been other movies where you kind of had a sense that this is not going in the right direction. But you never know. And so, and everyone, I can just say this, and I've met so many people, and I love editors because I've worked with them for so long. I have so much respect for post-production supervisors and sound and everyone that, there's so many people that come in to make the movie. And no one ever sets out to make a bad movie. Everyone's trying to make a good. So,
Oh
and
yeah,
they're just really difficult, and
definitely. Yeah.
you have to capture the zeitgeist, and so yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. No, that sounds like such a really cool experience. I love hearing about the transitioning of the film, but the transportation, like that added aspect that doesn't exist on a lot of film sets today. It's funny because today I was actually just listening to Sean Baker talk about the that process and how he was doing that on the Florida
I mean,
project
Sean's
and
on
like
iPhones.
campaigning to
I
shoot
mean,
on film.
Sean's
Yeah, yeah. No, it was funny. He went from iPhone to 35
yeah,
millimeter. Crazy
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. I first met Sean
But
on Tangerine on the press junket for
uh,
Tangerine, and yeah, I mean, I thought Enora was the best picture. I do, I it's one of the few years where I think that the Academy's actually got it right. I usually don't think they got it right. And as much as I feel bad for Demi Moore, Mikey was the best performance of the. I mean, she was my vote at Critics' Choice, and Demi ended up winning Critics' Choice anyways. But Mikey was,
yeah.
and the film and Sean, I loved Nora.
Yeah, oh, it was a great movie. I really enjoyed it as well, for sure. Um, but yeah, jumping into some of your acting roles, I know we talked off camera that you were only on set for American Pie for a day, but I totally know who you are in that movie. You're the guy in the
Yes.
lunchroom with the. You're like kind of like it's almost like doing like a little
Yeah.
dance.
So it was interesting. That was like basically an extra work. I was a background guy for hire. I remember getting the set, and I always like talking to the crew guys. I went to film school, so I feel like I have a little bit more in common with them. And I was talking to one of the crew guys, and I was like, so what? Because when you're an extra, you don't know what's going on. You sometimes don't even know.
Yeah.
I mean, this is 20 years ago. I don't know how it is now for background performers, but back then, you had no idea. You weren't seeing sides. You didn't know what the scene was. Sometimes you didn't even know who was in the movie. You'd hear a rumor like, oh, somebody's in this.
Yeah.
And at that time, none of those actors were really famous. I mean, I think Natasha Lyonne had maybe been in. I think I maybe knew who she was. I think one of the kids in the movie was in Sandlot or some baseball movie.
Thomas Ian Nicholas was in Rookie of the Year.
They were recognizable, sort of recognized, but no one was really.
Yeah.
And so, there was this scene, and I don't even remember how they chose me, but they chose me to be next to Natasha in the scene. There was no dialogue. They put a Walkman on me for our younger viewers. That's basically an iPod 30 years ago. And they just, they were like, you're just going to be annoying in the line and you're holding up the line. That was the direction that I was given. And I think Natasha gives me a look. She might push me a little bit or something. And then the funny thing was, so like, I had a feeling from shooting that scene, I was like, oh, I'm going to be in the movie. Like, I'm in the movie.
Yeah.
And so I was telling all my friends, and then the movie comes out, and I'm cut out if you see the movie on television, because it was a wide shot, and so when they cropped it for TV, you can only see like my shoulder, so you can only see me.
Gotcha.
And I don't even think I saw it in theaters. I think I saw it on a DVD, and I wasn't in it, so I was super bummed. And then later I saw a wide, the full, and I was like, oh, you can see me in that shot. That also happened in Man on the Moon. I'm in the front row when Andy Kaufman, the character Jim Carrey is playing, is Tony Clifton, one of his comedic characters. And so Jim was actually Tony Clifton for the entire 3 days. We shot it at the Comedy Store on Sunset. And I'm in the front row, but because of where the camera was shooting him, you never see me in the movie. And then 20 years later, Jim Carrey released a documentary about the making of Man on the Moon on Netflix. I can't remember the title of it, but you can find it on Netflix. And the behind-the-scenes cameras that shot that scene caught me. So I'm not in the movie, but I'm in the documentary about the movie.
That's awesome. That's so funny. Yeah, I think this transitions well into Man on the Moon. Sounds like it's an interesting story from the
Yeah, I mean,
set.
again, that was a super. So by that point, I can't remember. I want to say maybe that was shooting 2000, 2001. By that point, I had kind of tried to stop doing extra work because you can get caught
Okay.
up in that if you're really trying to be an actor. And you don't want to just be
Right.
seen as or at least back then, I don't know how it is now, but you didn't want to be seen as just a background person. But I was a huge Andy Kaufman fan, and Jim Carrey, of course. And I was living in Hollywood, just a couple blocks from the Comedy Store, and I heard they were shooting. I knew Man in the Moon was in production, and they were shooting these 3 scenes there. And I was like, I gotta get on that. I just wanted to be on the set. Like, I didn't even care. I just wanted to be on the set. And I was able to, because I knew whoever I had been doing extra work in the past, I contacted them. They were like, we can get you on this. So I got on, and I was lucky enough to get cast in the front. So I'm literally at the first table closest to the stage, where Jim Carrey, as Andy Kaufman, actually in these scenes as Tony Clifton, is performing. And much as you probably know from the documentary, Jim Carrey really went method for this movie. So he was Andy Kaufman for the entire 3 months they were shooting. And on the days that he was Tony Clifton, he was Tony Clifton. He never broke character. I never... And they talk about in the documentary, it drove the director Milos Forman nuts. It drove some of the actors nuts. I know Judd Hirsch had a problem with him. The wrestler, Jerry Lawton, lost it, something like that. But the real life wrestler who had was part of Andy Kaufman's story, he had problems with Jim Carrey on the set because he was just really trying to be Andy. So we're shooting these scenes. We're shooting there for 3 days. He's smoking cigarettes the whole time. And because that's what the character did. Tony Clifton just smoked cigarettes the whole time. So he's smoking cigarettes. So they're between scenes, and I'm sitting there. Jim Carrey is on stage, and all the makeup is Tony Clifton. And he's, I don't want to say arguing, but he's having a stern conversation with the director, Milos Forman. And they're, right in front of me, right there, and I'm just eating it up, watching this. And in character, once they finished, Milos walked away. In character, Tony Clifton, Jim Carrey / Tony Clifton, sees me watching them. And he goes, "Hey, kid." And I'm like, come here. And I leaned in. He kind of bent down from the stage to me at the table. I leaned in, and he's like, "Do you want to be rich?" "Yeah." "Do you want to be famous?" Like, "Yeah." "I'll tell you how. Give me your hand." I'm like, okay. So I reach out the palm of my hand. He takes the cigarette butt, the cigarette he'd been smoking. He'd already put it out. It wasn't lit. But he takes it wasn't lit.
Okay.
He takes the butt, puts it in my hand, shuts my hand. He goes, "Go home and clone me." And I was just like, what? Okay. And that was my interaction with Jim Carrey.
That's awesome.
So the scene that they were shooting was basically Tony Clifton comes out. It's the final scene in the movie. And I should also mention, these were the 3 final days of shooting, right? So the movie was wrapping. Like my last day, the movie wrapped.
Right.
And so the scene that we were shooting for 3 days is basically in the movie. Tony Clifton comes out at the Comedy Store and sings "I Will Survive," the old 70s disco song, "I Will Survive." So there's a live band of musicians on the stage. Jim Carrey's in costume. He must have performed "We Will Survive," 10 times over the course of 2 or 3 days. The third day, they had gotten that. Now they needed the audience reaction, right? So turn the camera, so Milos is turning the cameras around. But at this point, they don't need Jim to perform what, "I Will Survive." They got that. So all they need is for Jim to perform something for the audience reaction. So I also should mention that it's Halloween. The last day happened to be October 31st. So that day, instead of performing "I Will Survive," Jim Carrey's got a live band. He's Jim Carrey. and he's got an audience in front of him that they can't go anywhere because we're locked in, right, to the Comedy Store. He performed I Left My Heart in San Francisco as Tony Bennett. Like, he sounded like Tony Bennett. Did the Candyman as Sammy Davis Jr. He did Rainbow Connection as Kermit the Frog. And because it was Halloween, he did Tim Curry's song from Rocky Horror Picture Show as Tim Curry. And the band would just be catching up, because they didn't know what he was going to do.
Yeah.
And I remember when he started doing the Rocky Horror Picture Show song, I don't even think Milos was ready to record. The cameras had already turned around, and he starts screaming, "Turn the cameras on! Turn the cameras on!" And then that's how we shot it. And then the other funny thing was, because it was the last day of shooting, they sort of had the wrap party at the end of the day. And so Danny DeVito, who was in the movie and obviously knew Andy from Taxi and was also a producer on the film, comes out with a cake. And there had always been a rumor that Andy Kaufman, and this is going way back for the younger audience, but there was a show in the 70s called The Gong Show that was very popular on network television. And on the show, there was a comedian known called the Unknown Comedian. And he wore a lunch bag on his head with holes. So you never knew who he was. But there was always a rumor that Andy Kaufman was secretly the unknown comic. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But everyone was given on the set a sandwich bag with the eyes and the mouth cut out. So when we brought out the cake, the whole audience, the extras, the crew, everyone put these sandwich bags on their heads and, sang whatever for "He's a Jolly Good Fellow" or something, and brought the cake out.
Right.
Flash forward 20 years, and I'm interviewing Jim Carrey for the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie. And Jim was great. And we, sometimes some comedians can be very, very serious when you interview. The Will Ferrell and Bill Hader, they're not there to make you laugh, or Steve Carell. They're there to give an interview. But if they want to be funny, they will. Jim's very much that way, but he was hilarious. He was giving me a lot of funny stuff in the interview. And then at the end of the interview, I just mentioned to him, I was like, I was on the set of Men on the Moon. I was at the Comedy Store those final days. Yeah. He stood up, shook my hand, and gave me a hug and said, "Thank you for being a part of that movie. And Andy thanks you for being a part of that movie." So that was a moment for me, kind of full circle, and also like, that's really sweet. Not everyone's like that.
Definitely, yeah. No, that gave me goosebumps hearing that. That's awesome. No, that's really cool too. That so was that was like the first time you spoke to him out of when he was not in character.
I think I had maybe done a couple press conferences or read. I'd spoken to him on a red carpet or something. But that was the first time I had done what they call a junket. The one-on-one, interview for the movie.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, that's really cool. I didn't know that he goes method like that. That's
know that he goes
really cool. That's really interesting.
But he certainly
right. But okay, so
he made a whole documentary about it. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, that's really funny and interesting to hear. I mean, because he's always playing some crazy, wacky character, and I listened to some of his interviews before.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. He's great, and it's so interesting to see him as Jim, though, not like in the movies, and like he seems like a really cool guy, really down to earth, and like has a good
and he's
head
one
on
of
his
those
shoulders
actors
and
too,
whatnot.
where it's really a shame that the Academy doesn't reward comedy more often.
Yeah,
I mean, I know it's going to sound ridiculous to say this is an Oscar-worthy performance, but there's no other human being on Earth that could have done Ace Ventura. Nobody could have done Ace Ventura except for him. I mean, Ace Ventura, it's just one of those things where, like, I don't know what we're giving awards for. So, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes, like, that's just a brilliant, brilliant performance.
definitely, yeah. We were always watching Pet Detective growing up, like on the rides for vacations. That was always one, and then there was Nature
Right.
Calls
That was
as
the
well.
Ace
So they
Ventura
were just
2,
the
Nature
two.
Call. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, those were always a lot of fun. Yeah, yeah. And also Boogie Nights. It sounds like you spent quite a bit of time on that
That
set.
was my first real movie set that I was ever on because
Okay,
I
that's quite
it
a one
was,
to
and I have
start
an
with.
interesting story about that. So I went to
Yeah.
Emerson College, as I mentioned, and between my junior and senior year, I came out to LA for a summer with some a couple buddies from college and a couple buddies from high school, and we all decided we were just going to do extra work for the summer and kind of get a
Uh,
feel for the business,
right.
which was a great, great experience for me. And so
Uh, yeah, I
I
can
had
imagine.
mostly been doing extra work in TV shows and commercials most of this
Uh,
summer, summer of 1996. And there was a movie that was casting that were looking for a lot of people my age. You know, I was 20 years old. So they were looking for a lot of 20-year-olds. And I
right.
had long hair at that point. This was the 90s, so I was doing the Kurt Cobain thing. I had the long
Yeah.
hair, and my buddy from
Right.
college had long hair, but all my high school buddies had like military short haircuts. And we all went
Okay.
up for Starship Troopers, and all my high school buddies got Starship Troopers, but me and my college buddy didn't
Uh,
because we had long hair. And the guy
right.
casting
Okay.
said, if you want to cut your hair, I can get you in. And I was like, I don't know. And he goes, but listen, I've got something for, and they used to call them long hairs. Like when they were casting, that's what they would call it, long hairs. And he's like,
Uh,
I got something
yeah.
coming in about 2 or 3 weeks, and it's going to be a lot of work, and I need some long hair. So maybe you want to wait. And so me and my buddy decided. So it was a little heartbreaking when all my friends are going off to do Starship Troopers. My buddy was
Right.
sitting
Yeah,
by
I
the
can
pool.
imagine.
But a couple of weeks later, they were out of work, and then we went and did, and it was Boogie Nights, of course. So we go to do Boogie Nights, and we were there. I think so. I'm in the opening shot of the movie in the disco scene. So
Okay.
if you know the film, that's
Yeah.
a 10-minute opening dolly shot that never cuts.
Yeah.
And I'll explain how that was done because that was super interesting. But that's
Yeah.
the
Please.
scene.
Yeah.
It starts outside the club and then comes all the way in and ends on Wahlberg inside. And so my buddy and I show up, and this was we were taking it seriously, right? I mean, we were 20-year-old college kids. We liked to party. It was the
Yeah.
90s. We enjoyed that, but we were there
Yeah.
to work on this movie. So we show up
Yeah.
and we meet, and there's 100 extras, all 20 to 25-year-old kids, basically, right? And we show up and we quickly realized everyone but us was wasted. Every extra was drunk
Wow.
or high. There was one girl, one guy had cans of Budweiser he snuck in his bag. Another girl had a bag of wine. They used to sell wine in bags in grocery stores. I don't think they still do. I don't drink, but she
they do.
had a backpack full of a bag of wine. People had weed.
Yeah.
There was all sorts of stuff going on. And so, and you also have to remember, no one knew who anyone in this movie was when we were shooting it in the summer of '96.
Right.
So you had, now, my buddy and I, being cinephiles, we knew Paul Thomas Anderson because we had seen Hard Eight that previous year.
Yeah.
And there had been a rumor, and I don't even know if this is true or not, that Paul had gone to Emerson and dropped out after one semester to go make Hard Eight. So we were super, as Emerson film students and acting students, we were really super interested in, like, who's this guy making this big, New Line movie? But you got to remember, Mark Wahlberg was Marky Mark from the Funky Bunch and the Calvin Klein commercials. Burt Reynolds was an over-the-hill Burt Reynolds. Julianne Moore, I recognized from Shortcuts, Robert Altman's movie, but she hadn't done the Jurassic Park yet, Jurassic Park 2, so no one knew who she was. Heather Graham we knew from the Corey Feldman movie, but that was it. No one knew her by name. And then it was super interesting. So I recognized Don Cheadle from the Devil in the Blue Dress, which was a Denzel Washington movie that had come out the year before, and it was a period piece. I knew John C. Reilly from Casualties of War and State of Grace, which were both period pieces. And I knew Luis Guzman from Carlito's Way, also a 70s period piece. So to see the three of them as we were going to wardrobe, walking out, and again, I didn't know that's John C. Reilly, that's Don Cheadle. These were just guys I had seen in movies in 70s costumes, now walking by me in 70s. And that was the moment I was like, I am on a movie set. So they, we got there maybe 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon. I think we shot one little thing outside the club quickly, like around maybe 7. And then we had an early break for dinner. So we broke for dinner from like 8 to 9 or 7 to 8, something like that. And then basically we're on the set from 9 p.m. to 6 in the morning. I remember never leaving that disco set because that was a 10-minute dolly shot. So I think we did it maybe a dozen times throughout the night.
Okay.
So during dinner, there was this very tall, very long-haired, almost looked like he belonged in Metallica or something, right? Extra, who was sitting next to me and my buddy. And he goes, hey, man, look at this. And he shows us a tab of acid, of LSD. And he's like, I'm going to drop this before we start shooting. And me and my buddy were just like, okay, good luck with that. So we don't see that guy, and we go off and we start filming and we start doing the shots. And it was really fascinating to watch Paul. It was his second movie. He was a young guy, but he was completely in control of everything. And to see how the shot was moving across the club. We're sort of close to the stage, but kind of off the side to the left a little bit. So sort of between the stage where like Don Cheadle and Riley are. And then in the scene, Burt Reynolds and Julianne Moore are in a booth. So we're kind of in the middle of two. And Roller Girl comes rolling by us when the camera... You can't see me in the movie, but because it goes so fast, but kind of pans over to them. Right. And so in between shots, this was back in the day where you could smoke in a club. You could smoke cigarettes in a bar.
Right.
And obviously we were playing like it was the 70s, so everyone was just smoking. And an extra was smoking a cigarette who was in the booth next to Burt Reynolds and Julianne Moore. Keep in mind, these are 20-year-old kids. Julianne Moore's not famous yet. And they probably are not cinephiles like me and my buddy. They don't know Burt Reynolds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So one of the girls asked Burt Reynolds for a cigarette. Either for a cigarette or to light her cigarette. I don't remember what. Well, keep in mind, even in 1996, in Burt Reynolds' mind, he's still the biggest box office draw of 1976.
Yeah.
Not happy about an extra speaking to him. She was thrown off the set. Yeah.
Oh,
and
wow.
So there was a little bit of a cut. And actually, I remember Julianne Moore trying to, quell the issue. And I think even Heather kind of got involved. They were very nice trying to calm him down. But he was, and I'm not talking out of school about Burt Reynolds. I mean, PTA has talked about how even after the movie came out, Burt Reynolds didn't like it. And it's like, you were not.
Oh, yeah. I've seen.
So I'm not talking out of school about Burt. So we took a break at maybe 4 or 5 a.m., like a fifth, but no one was to leave the set, but we took like a 15-minute break. Because also remember, it's one dolly guy, or no, it wasn't dolly, it was, wasn't dolly, it was, what do you call it when it's just a cameraman with the camera, there's a name for it and I'm blanking on it. But no, the camera guy who operates the camera like connected to his chest and he's moving with the camera. There's a name for it and I'm blanking on it. But anyways, that guy, so he was tired because he's carrying the camera, throughout this whole thing.
Yeah.
This 10-minute shot we're shooting 10 times. So we took a break.
Oh yeah.
And my buddy and I are just sitting there. We're exhausted. It's 4 a.m. We're exhausted, And we see the guy who told us he was going to take acid. And he's in.
Right. So how many hours later was this?
Probably 6-7 hours later. Yeah, because it was like maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, and now it's 4 a.m. And so he's tripping. And he is standing in the middle of the dance floor, arms out like this, head up, just spinning around, spinning in circles, looking at the ceiling. And I was just like, oh, man, this guy's having quite an adventure. And then at the end of we got the final shot, and there was a lot of applause for the camera operator. And, and that was a really interesting movie to be on. Obviously, it ended up being, one of the great movies of the 90s. And kicking off, one of the great directors, in my opinion, of my generation, certainly, PTA.
Right,
and it was super fun to be on that set and kind of see what everything was going. A fun fact, Leo was supposed to be the Mark Wahlberg part? And then he went to do a small movie called Titanic instead. Well, and that was the other thing with Wahlberg, because my buddy and I from college, from Emerson, there was another guy we knew at Emerson at the time, and his older brother was the director of Basketball Diaries, which had already come out. And so we knew, because Wahlberg's quite serious in that, and we knew that Wahlberg could do a little bit more than, being Marky Mark. But we didn't, quite know that he had Dirk Diggler in him. So, but that's a great.
Yeah, that's wild. That's quite the story. You did a really great job telling it too. I really appreciate the storytelling. It really painted a really clear picture. Like, I really know like these people and everything. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you miss the R-rated comedies of the 2000s? Well, good news. I've got one coming out this year. It's called Hometown Summer and is a 2000s-style comedy about 3 childhood best friends navigating one final summer before school starts. And yes, there are drugs, sex, and plenty of bad decisions. You can stay up to date on the movie by signing up for my email list at hometownsummer.com, and as a bonus, you'll get a free copy of my first feature, Rosetta Stoned. I'll be posting this link in the description and in the pinned comment.
Yeah, so another movie, maybe not the critical acclaim of Boogie Nights, but I think it's one of the all-time classic comedies in old school. You were in this movie as well.
This one as well, and this was the one thing I did that I would say was a little better than extra work. It was basically a featured kind of part, but it's interesting how it became that. So my agent at the time had sent me up for one of the frat boys in the movie, and I didn't even get an audition. So it was like, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't even audition for it. My headshot was sent in and nothing ever happened. And then I remember it was just a couple weeks before Christmas, probably in 2000, I think, because I think we shot in early 2001. So it was just a couple weeks before Christmas, and I got a call from the casting director, called me, not my agent, called me directly and said, Todd Phillips picked your headshot out of a pile of headshots and wants you to play this part. And I was like, well, when's the audition?
Yeah.
Because I was going home to Boston to see my parents for Christmas. And they're like, no, you don't get it. No audition. We want you to go to this wardrobe fitting. They need to put you in a tuxedo, and you'll film, January 3rd through the 6th or whatever it was. It was like 4 days. And I was like, and I'm thinking, wow, I got cast. Like, I'm going to have a speaking role. And I was already SAG by this point. I was in the Screen Actors Guild. I had my SAG card.
Right.
But I was like, this is going to be huge. So I go home for Christmas. I tell all my friends, I'm going to be in a movie with Will Ferrell. Now, remember, Will Ferrell's just the guy from Saturday Night Live at this point.
Right,
Luke
yeah.
Wilson was one of the Wilson brothers, you know what I mean, from the Wes Anderson movies. Like he and Owen weren't even big yet.
Right, yeah.
And no one knew Todd Phillips. And who's the other actor? Oh, and Vince was probably
Vince had just done
Vince was probably
Swingers.
the most famous person because he had already done Swingers and Psycho and Jurassic Park and a couple, you know. So Vince was probably the biggest guy in the movie at that point. But even his career, I think, had dipped a little bit by the point we were shooting that movie. And so
it definitely
after Old School and Dodgeball and he kind of found and then certainly the movie behind you, Wedding Crashers. So I show up to the set and I'm thinking, this is it. I get put in extra holding. And I had just completely defeated. I was like, oh, I mean, I thought this was going to be something. I'm an extra. So I'm an extra holding. And we shot the actual wedding scene itself for 3 days. And then we shot the wedding reception was one full day after that. And so this was the first day where we're shooting the, you know, where Will is walking or the dad is walking, Perry Reeves, the fiance to Will Ferrell's character, down the aisle. And Vince is clearly again, if you haven't seen it, for those, you know, try to remember, in the wedding scene, there's literally a shot and it's Will Ferrell as the groom, Luke Wilson as his best man, and the ushers are Vince Vaughn, me, and another guy. And I still had my long hair then. And it was sort of, you know, kind of tucked behind my ears and kind of came down. And it looked a little like the band Hanson, if you remember Hanson from the 90s, those kids. And so it became very clear very quickly that there was no script. Like Vince was just making up whatever he wanted. And so they were getting the shot where he's kind of whispering in Will's ear, like, run now. This is the last chance you get. And that's all made up. Yeah. You know, she's wearing white. That's not, you know, look at the dad. Like all this stuff he's just making up. So he starts involving me and looking, and I'm trying to act like, and I didn't even really know what I was playing other than a groomsman. I kind of made up a story in my head, like, I'm a cousin or something. And then it was later said, I think maybe Todd mentioned this, that I was Perry Reeves's brother. And that's why I was, that these guys didn't really know me, but kind of knew of, you know what I mean? Like that was sort of the relationship. And I'm thinking in my head, I got to say something because I don't want to be an extra. I got to get bumped here. Yeah. What am I going to do? And Vince is sort of improvising, and in between shots, Todd's coming over and sort of talking to him, and I'm kind of butting myself in a little bit to seem like I'm part of it too, you know. And Todd did like I was giving him looks, and that was one thing that was one little encouragement Todd gave me. He was like, "Keep giving the looks, keep giving the looks." I was like, "Oh, good, because I was giving looks like, you're saying stuff about my sister. Like, what are you doing? You know, that kind of thing. You can see me look at him a little weird in the movie. Yeah. So there was a scene or a outtake that ultimately did not make the movie, where he's saying this stuff about, you know, my sister walking down the aisle, and I look at him and I go, "Hey man, knock it off. That's my sister." That's what I said. And I may have done it. Again, this is all, you know, 20-year-old memories, and I don't, you know, what really happened and what I just think happened. But, you know, so if anything, you know, Todd's watching this and I didn't get anything right, please excuse me. But my memory is that we did that a couple of times, and each time Vince's reaction was different. So I remember one time he knocked me kind of on the head and said, "Turn around, Hanson." And there was another time where he said, "No one's talking to you." There was just a couple of interactions. Again, none of that made the movie. But as soon as I spoke, someone came over to me and I had to sign a contract because now I'm bumped. And now I'm not getting the SAG minimum, the extra minimum for the day. I'm now getting the SAG wagers or whatever, you know what I mean? And I got bumped up. Next great part is I'm no longer eating with the extra, and nothing against that, you know what I mean? But at that point I was an extra dying to be more. So I got to eat with the cast. It was the first time I ever had shark steak. I remember very clearly shark steak was being served at lunch. And so I got to sit with the cast at lunch. I didn't really talk to them, but I got to sit at the table with them. And the next day I had a trailer. And again, I didn't have my own trailer. Wow. I was sharing it with 2 or 3 other of the smaller roles in the movie, but I didn't have to be in holding. So that was a very exciting excitement. And that was just like a lot of fun. And there was a lot of that improvising. I remember Vince was saying stuff. I mean, he was even making jokes in between. And I very clearly remember him saying that. Also have to keep in mind, at the time, Will Ferrell was best known for being comedy partners with Chris Kattan, right? Mm-hmm. And in some ways, Vince was best known for his work with Jon Favreau. So Vince was like making jokes. And I remember him saying to Will Ferrell, Will, Chris Kattan just called. He wants his career back. And later, I don't remember if it was Luke or somebody said to Vince, hey, Jon Favreau called. He wants his career back. Vince did not like that. And then, if you remember, there's Bridesmaids, right? And it's Perry Reeves from Entourage. Yeah. She's the bride to Will Ferrell. And then there was a maid of honor and 2 other bridesmaids. And they were basically extras too, except one of the maid of honor, I think she had some lines in another scene. You know who that ended up being? That's Sarah Shahi.
Oh, who was that?
She was in Black Adam with, and she's been in a ton of TV shows. She was the maid of honor. Now, she has a line in the streaking scene because she's in the car with Perry when they pick up Will in the streaking scene. But when I was on set, I had no idea that she was in another scene in the movie where she has a line. So I just thought at the time that she was another, kind of glorified extra like the rest of us. And there was another bridesmaid, and I remember her last name was Kaplan. And the rumor on the set was she was Gabe Kaplan from Welcome Back, Kotter's daughter. But I don't know that to be true. That was just what people were saying. And there was also a rumor that the father who walks her down the aisle in the movie, was Will Ferrell's real life accountant, and that Will got him. I don't know that to be true either, but I remember hearing that on the set. So that was just an amazing, really fun experience. And it was great to see Todd back then. That was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. That sounds like a super exciting experience and quite a roller coaster. And I mean, that's. I laugh immediately when you said the bit about no script with Vince, because I've talked to a few people who've worked with him. They're like,
I mean, again, on that one, I never
he's
saw.
He's so good at it.
I didn't have, we were just making stuff up. I mean, that was just that was me being a desperate actor, just trying to get a line and trying to get a SAG bump. But he was certainly just like making stuff up. And but Todd seemed to have a good sense of what was going on. I mean, I think even with Todd, that was maybe his second feature. He had done 2 documentaries and then Road Trip and then Old School.
He did Road Trip a couple years prior.
And then fascinating to see him, go on to do Joker and stuff like that. And I remember seeing Joker at the Toronto Film Festival, as a film critic years later. Mm. And I kept forgetting it was Todd Phillips and thinking it was Paul Thomas Anderson. Because it felt like that. It felt like a PTA movie. I didn't know Todd had that in him. Now, I also saw Joker 2, and so that's a whole other... I think whatever points he gets for Joker 1, he gets a couple points taken away for Joker 2. But I still I think Todd
I didn't mind that movie as much as most people did. But
it's not a good movie. I mean, it's fascinating to see a talented filmmaker purposely make a bad movie. Because I think that's what he was trying to do. I mean, not a bad movie, but purposely transcend the expectations of the fans. Oh, this is what you want? Well, then I'm going to give you exactly what you don't want. That doesn't happen in commerce in film very often. I give him a lot of credit for a big swing, but ultimately, I don't think it helped the DC brand much.
No, it didn't. No, I would love to see him get back into comedy, though. I hope he gets another chance at it. I mean, he's honestly my favorite comedy director.
Yeah, I mean, the Hangover movies, I actually like, people give Hangover 3 a lot of crap. I actually think Hangover 3, is much better than Hangover 2. And
I agree.
Not quite as good as Hangover 1 because it's the first, but there's a lot of good stuff in Hangover 3, and it gets completely
and they tried a lot of new stuff
even though Hangover 2 actually was a bigger hit than the first Hangover financially. I think people later realized that it's just not good, and so I think that hurt.
Yeah, I just rewatched the 3. It's kind of like the same exact movie as the original, but it's like just takes place in Bangkok and. There's some. It's not quite as engaging.
Well,
I guess
it's
not as
almost
surprising
like the Taken franchise, right? Like once you do the first one, you know what I mean. Like, what do you do with the second? You know what I mean? Like, it's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard when you have that brilliant a concept for the first movie. Where do you go from there?
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you all the way. I like number 3 more than number 2 as well. I don't hate number 2. I think it's very, very funny, but it's not Hangover 1. Him and his writing partner Scott, I think they had a lot of fun with it. Like I was definitely laughing really hard, but it was, yeah. I feel like I feel like those kinds of movies, like it's funny. Like I just rewatched the American Pie sequel. I feel like for me, a lot of those they're really fun the first time, but they don't have the same magic that like the original movie will have where you can just like rewatch them over and over again.
Yeah, I've never been. I mean, even having been in the first American Pie, I'm not really a big fan of those movies. That's not my type of humor. That quote unquote gross out humor of those films. But I did recently interview Jennifer Coolidge for her new movie Riff Raff. It's a comedy that I really like a lot, and it's got an amazing cast. It's her, Bill Murray, Pete Davidson, Ed Harris, and she's funny. She's very funny woman. Yeah,
awesome. Yeah. So your position as editor-in-chief for Moviefone, could you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So Moviefone, the old brand from the 90s, you're probably a little too young to remember, but when I was in high school, you would actually call a number on a landline, and there would be an automated voice that would say, "Hello and welcome to Moviefone." Yeah,
I actually do remember
push
this.
Push 1 for Armageddon. Push 2 for Jurassic Park. So... And you would then put in your area code, and they would tell you what times the movies were playing at your local theater. So obviously, technology in the 2000s happened. We're selling tickets now, so we're sort of like a Fandango again. We're a database, so we're like an IMDb, but we're also like a Deadline where, we have reviews. So I'm in charge of editorial. So that's the news, reviews, interviews, and we get great interviews. We have Jennifer Coolidge on right now. We just had Gabrielle Union also for Riff Raff. This past week, I talked to Aaron Paul for his new movie. I'm talking to the director of Tommy Boy on Monday for the 30th anniversary of Tommy Boy. We just did an interview with Keanu Reeves for his new docuseries. I actually got to go to Keanu's motorcycle shop in L.A. to talk to him for that. We did the Daredevil junket, talked to Charlie, and so we get to do all the big junkets. reviews, interviews. I did a thing. The trailer for F1 came out earlier this week, and we did a press conference with Joseph Kosinski, the director, who also directed Top Gun Maverick, for F1. I'll be at CinemaCon in a couple of weeks for that big presentation from the studios. So so it's been really great. We've been doing really good. I think I got there and we had maybe 1 million monthly users. We're close to 7 million now. So I've been there about 3 years, going on
Congrats.
4. Just been rebuilding the brand. We're relaunching the app later this year, before the summer. And so, it's just been going really good. And I'm just really happy at Moviefone. I've been doing entertainment journalism now for almost 20 years. I pivoted away from acting probably around 2006, 2007. And I started by working for a magazine that no longer exists, but was the best. It was called Wizard Magazine. If you're a comic book or toy or gaming fan, that was really the trade paper for comic books. So I sort of got my feet wet doing that and covering Comic-Cons, and eventually worked for Movie Web, and then worked. I actually was managing editor of Relativity Media's I Am Rogue for 5 years, and then I worked for a company called M Time, which was sort of the Fandango of China. So I worked for this Chinese outlet for 5 years, producing videos and doing stuff for that. And that was super fun. I got to go to the Oscars 4 or 5 times. I got to go to the Cannes Film Festival and do all this kind of stuff. That's when I, met Jim Carrey. And so, and met Eddie Murphy and got to meet Bruce Willis and a lot of the people I fanboyed over when I was a kid. So it's really been a great career. I don't regret leaving acting. I mean, I sometimes have a little bit of the bug for it, but at the same time, I get to be on camera. I get to interview people, talk to people. I'm writing, I'm being creative, doing a lot of video and podcasts and things like that. So, it's been super fun. And as you mentioned earlier, member of the Critics' Choice Association. I got in there a couple years ago. That was like, thank goodness I finally got in. That was great.
So what does that entail, being a part of the Critics' Choice Association? Like, I know you're a voter in the Critics' Choice Awards,
the Critics'
correct?
Choice Awards that was on this year, Chelsea Handler hosted. So I voted at that award show. We nominate, we vote, we do reviews throughout the year on the Critics' Choice website. There's different rankings for movies, so once we've seen them, we kind of do that. And there's other, charities and things that the organization is doing throughout the year. So, we're involved in that. And we do, and there's they set up a lot of interviews and stuff too through the organization. So it's just a great organization to be a part of. If you're a critic and get to interact with other critics, and the award show is always fun to go to as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, you said you voted for Anora for Best Picture. This year, correct?
Anora I actually didn't vote for Sean. I voted for Denis. I split the vote. I voted for Denis for Dune 2. Which I was really shocked that didn't do. I actually believe if Dune 2 had been released in December of 2024, it would have won Best Picture. But because it was released in March, no one remembers it, and it was lucky to be invited to the party.
So I'm curious, is there like a list? Is it like you can vote for these 5 to 10 movies or actor or whatever the category is, or is it like you can vote for any movie or actor that was released in this year?
If you're a voter who can nominate, so I'm in the film category, so I nominate. I can nominate for film, and then I vote for film. If you're in the TV category, you would nominate TV and vote for TV, but everyone can vote in the final votes for each, if that makes sense, right? So I can't nominate for television, but once we know who they are, I can vote for it, and vice versa. And so, when I'm nominating, no, there's no restrictions. You can nominate And, I mean, in fact, I nominated Hugh Jackman for Deadpool and Wolverine for Best Supporting Actor. Obviously, no one else did, and so he was not on the ballot. So once you get the ballot, then you're voting for whoever's there. And sometimes, so in fact, another nominee that I nominated and got nominated in other award shows, I do not believe we nominated her for Critics' Choice, was Pamela Anderson for The Last Showgirl. And I might have actually voted for her over Mikey, because I assumed more people would vote for Mikey, and I would want to get a vote out for Pam. But Pam wasn't nominated, so I had to go with either Mikey or Demi, and I went with Mikey. And then Demi did end up winning that, because more Critics' Choice members went with Demi. But I had Mikey on my vote card for that. And then, of course, when I predicted the Oscars, I was like, well, Demi's won everything. Of course she's going to win. And so I only predict the top 6. I don't get into who's going to do sound or any of that stuff. But I do a prediction for the top 6. And I was 5 for 6 this year. And if I had just gone with my heart with Mikey, I would have been 6 for 6. But I also went, my vote, I thought the best male performance of the year, hands down, with Timothée Chalamet.
Okay. I like that
for Adrian Brody winning a second Oscar for the same role he played 20 years ago. And and I've interviewed Adrian. He's great actor, very nice guy. But I was really rooting for Timmy, but I also knew that Adrian was going to win.
Yeah, Timothy's who I would have voted for on that ballot. I really liked, I don't know if he'd be Best Actor or Best Supporting, but Hugh Grant in Heretic.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that movie.
See, I think he was competing in the Best Actor category. I think that's a one, there's a lot this year, because there's a very good case to say that Zoe Saldana and Kieran Culkin were not supporting actors. They were the leads of their movies, and they won the 2 supporting. So there's a lot of what they, what's been nicknamed category fraud, right? And so you could make that's an interesting one with Hugh Grant, because I think you could make a strong case he's the supporting actor in the film, but because he's the biggest name in the movie, I think they went with him in lead category. And he got nominated in lead for SAG and a couple other places. I think if he could have actually competed for the Oscars in supporting, he might have had a better shot. But for some weird, and nothing against Kieran Culkin, I thought he was great playing Kieran Culkin in that movie. But I mean, I didn't quite understand why in January it was just decided he's getting an Oscar for playing the same character he did on Succession. I mean, it was just like no one was beating him. Like, it was just decided that he was winning, and I don't completely understand why. But
Can I give you one more snub? This movie, I don't think was nominated for anything, but it was my personal favorite movie of 2024, The Bike Riders.
Bike Riders is good. Bike Riders is a good movie. It didn't do well at the box office, and I think it had mixed reviews.
No.
I think we gave it a fairly, positive to slightly mixed review. But I mean, I think our review was a little bit, I didn't write it, but I think it was a little bit teeing more on the positive side. I liked it. I don't think the movie showcases Austin Butler's best acting chops. I'm not saying he doesn't have acting chops. I just don't think that movie showcases them well. He's sort of just the pretty boy. And that might have been part of the problem. But I thought she's amazing in it. Jodie Comer's amazing. And Hardy's great. And it was really interesting. I got to interview, I'm blanking on his name, but I got to interview the director, Jeff Nichols. Thank you.
Nichols, I think is his
name.
And
I asked him, because in the movie, it's never really mentioned, but Hardy's character is watching you see him at home with his wife in a short moment, and he's not talking in the accent that he talks in the rest of the movie to his wife.
Oh, interesting. I missed that.
They're watching a Marlon Brando movie on television. And then the rest of the movie, when he's in scenes with the other bike riders, he's doing Marlon Brando. And I asked Nichols, was it because they decided that the character is playing a character? And he said yes, that was the way they decided that the tough guy biker character that even Hardy is playing in the movie, the character's not really that character. He's pretending to be that guy.
Oh, that's so creative.
And that's why I think Hardy's kind of a genius. I don't think it always comes through because he gets a little wacky sometimes in what he's doing in a movie, but he's a genius. Like Tom Hardy's great. He's great. Oh, yeah. Great actor. 100%. I mean, even in the stupid Venom movies. And listen, as a hardcore comic book fan, that character is not Venom. That's not the character I read in the comics. It's a totally different thing they've created. But it is entertaining. I really like Tom Hardy's performance in the Venom. And there's Venom movies have other problems. Too. But I really like the performance and the relationship he's created between those characters. Which, again, that's him. That doesn't exist in comic books. That's not, like, he created that. And it makes them somewhat, even for their for their shortcomings, it makes them somewhat entertaining.
So speaking on the topic of movie criticism, comedy's quite the polarizing genre. I think it's probably number one. I mean, I know horror's there as well. Horror seems to do a bit better with critics, at least as of late. I do think horror movies, I think we're in a bit of a golden age of horror personally. But comedy, like the ones we talked about, like American Pie and Old School, like those two come to mind, and like those like very polarizing reviews. And like a lot of really fun comedies. One that I think of, for example, is like Eurotrip, just get like terrible reviews from critics. And yeah, it's such a difficult genre. And I'm wondering, as a critic, what to you makes a great comedy movie?
Man, I mean, comedies are really hard, as you know. Like, they're really hard to make. They're really hard to work. I think, we're sort of two different issues, right? Like, why are critics so harsh on comedies and what makes a great comedy? I mean, critics are harsh on comedies because most critics have never tried to make a movie or tried to do anything funny. They don't realize how hard it is, and also comedy can be so subjective, right? Like a horror movie, either you're scared or you're not scared. A drama, either you're in it, you're being pulled in, or you're not. But a comedy can be super subjective. Like I mentioned before, like I'm not really into sort of that American Pie type of, humor. I like a sort of more cerebral, like I love Wes Anderson. I mean, I think The Royal Tenenbaums is the funniest movie ever made, right?
Okay. I really enjoy it.
Another one that I've watched several times. Wes is a bit of a critic's darling, right? His movies aren't quite always considered comedies, even though they clearly are. They're given a prestige that other comedies don't get. But for a lot of people, a lot of critics didn't love the last, The French Dispatch. I love The French Dispatch, and I laughed so much at that movie. And back to Royal Tenenbaums, I mean, there are lines just like, there's a dent here, there's a dent here, and a dent here. Like, that makes me laugh. I don't know why. You know what I mean? Like, there's something quirky.
Right.
I'm kind of more like, old Letterman show. I grew up on that and Saturday Night Live. And so I kind of like a little bit more of like that quirky stuff. I mean, another really funny movie, back to our friend PTA, is Inherent Vice. I think people forget. I mean, Inherent Vice is hilarious. and now another thing, and this is, I'm sort of cribbing this from, I heard the great Norm Macdonald say this once, and so this is not my original thought, but Norm said, if you call a movie a comedy, you're effed from the beginning. You're already effed, right?
Yeah.
But and he made this point. And I agree with this point that Norm Macdonald made, which is Tarantino's movies are comedies. I've never seen a Tarantino movie and I wanted to cry, or you know what I mean? Like Tarantino's movie, you know, a guy stuck a watch up his ass. That's hilarious. But you know, with comedies and also the structure of Hollywood and studios, and I mean, we could get in the whole, like, why are there not comedies being released on, you know, in theaters now and they're only on, you know, streamers and blah, 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 and the studio interference. But, you know, they have to have a certain amount of jokes on a page. And, you know, Tarantino can do a 7-minute bit where Christopher Walken is talking about you know, leading up to the watch. And so I think, I don't know why there's just such strict, you know, harsh criticism when it comes to comedies. I think a lot of people just think, oh, it's a comedy, I could do that better. You know what I mean? And I have so much respect for anyone that makes anything, you know, makes a movie, makes a TV show.
Right.
And also, I mean, like, I covered a couple comedies earlier this year in a row. So we did Cordially Invited, which was Will Ferrell and Reese Witherspoon on Amazon. And I'm blanking on the title, but the pregnancy movie that Amy Schumer did on Netflix. Almost pregnant, or not,
I know what you're
not
talking
quite
about,
pregnant,
but I can't.
or unpregnant. So anyways, listen, both of them were cute. Both of them were funny. You know what I mean? Like, I enjoyed both of them. I don't think either are a bad movie. But neither is a movie where I'm going to be like, oh, man, that was brilliant. You know, the 17th movie about a mishap at a wedding, or the 20th movie we've seen about, you know, a woman who, or anyone a man who tells a lie and gets caught up in the lie and has to live the lie, you know.
Right.
We've seen those things done before. So I think also sometimes with that type of, for lack of a better term, sort of a Saturday Night Live star vehicle comedy, you know, we've seen them so many times, it's hard to do an original one, you know? And then when you do an original comedy, sometimes it's just like, it's too out there, you know? But yeah, it's interesting. So I don't know. I mean, what makes a good comedy? I mean, I think it's got to make you laugh, right? It's got to be funny. I think you have to care about the characters. Now, this is a big thing for me too, and it's sort of a larger point about acting and or you know movies and TV. For an actor, for me to watch them in a movie for 2 hours, especially lead a TV series, you know, and I'm going to watch this series for 2, 3, 4 years. I have to like the actor. I don't mean the character. I mean the actor, right? Right. There's got to be something about that actor that draws me in. And now this is off comedy a little bit, but to use an example, I was always a fan of an actor named Titus Welliver. And Titus Welliver was one of those that guys for a long time. He was in Deadwood. He'd be on Prison Break or 24. And you're like, oh, that guy. And there was just something I liked about him. And then he finally got to be the lead of his own show, this show called Bosch. It's run for like 9 years or 10 years on Amazon. It's crazy how long the show's been on. And he's the lead cop guy, you know, and I didn't know anything. It's based on some books, and I didn't know anything about it. But I was like, I like that guy. I'll watch this show because of that guy. Jeffrey Donovan, who used to be on Burn Notice. I didn't really care for Burn Notice, but I liked that guy. I'd watch that guy. But, you know, if Burn Notice starred... I'm not going to name anyone, but an actor that I don't have that feeling for, and I could name names, but I won't. It's harder for me to get into it. You know what I mean? Like, it's harder for me to enjoy that show. And there are shows where I really like the format, but I don't like the host. And I'm watching the show because I enjoyed the format so much, but I'm not that into the person, you know? So with a comedy, I think you have to have the right actor who's likable, obviously funny, you connect with, and then a good story. And I think there needs to be some heart, but also, you know, it needs to be funny. And funny does not have to be 6 jokes a page. Funny can be, you know, we get to this, you know, funny can be, I'll give you a great example. Royal Tenenbaums, Hackman's character comes to see Angelica Houston, his ex-wife, for the first time in like 10 years or 20 years, and says, you know, I'm dying of cancer. I want to get back in the family. I want to spend time with the family. Well, before he says he has cancer, I want to spend time with the family. I want to spend time with the family. You know, and it's a moving shot with them walking down a street in New York. And Angelica Houston is kind of walking in frame above him, sort of looking back like, no, get out of here. I don't know. I don't want anything to do with you. It's too late. I'm sorry. Goodbye. Yeah. And then he says, I'm dying. Now she's walked out of frame. And he's just at the edge of frame, standing there, staring at her. And she slowly walks back and is kind of looking at him like, what? That's hilarious to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you know what I mean? So it can be the direction. It can be the silence, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. I think those are all really great points. And it's funny because like a lot of those are just like what makes a good movie in general. Without the
well, I always
the humor.
To say something about what you were saying about horror films before, and I actually agree with you. I think horror films are being better reviewed now than they've ever been. I'm not a horror guy. I'm not. I don't love horror movies.
Okay.
I can tell you 3 of my favorite movies on my top 20 list last year were Longlegs, The Substance, and Heretic. Certainly could all be considered horror movies. One of my favorite movies so far this year is Osgood Perkins, who directed Longlegs, The Monkey. Which, by the way, is very funny. The Monkey is actually hilarious, even though it's a horror movie. And so I always say I'm not a fan of horror movies, but I can recognize a great one. Because I can recognize good filmmaking. You know, The Conjurings. I'm not a Conjuring fan, but I know that James Wan is a good director, and that's a well-made movie.
Definitely.
So I think you can recognize that too in comedy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to love Amy Schumer's pregnancy movie to know Amy Schumer is very talented, very funny. There's some funny jokes, some funny situations in this movie. You know, it may not have worked for me, but completely, but it. You know, and then let me ask you a question. Do you think Anora is a comedy?
You know, that's a really interesting question. I would say yes, but it's so interesting because they're all so like comedy is just like it's so different. Like it doesn't feel like a Judd Apatow comedy, for example, like from like the 2000s, but like it totally like you feel like the overall like mood and vibe. Like I don't know how you classify it as something other than a comedy, but it's like such a wide world.
I 100% agree. I mean, I definitely. It doesn't necessarily start off as a comedy, but it definitely becomes a farce by the middle. When all the other Russian characters come in, you know, the bodyguard guys, that's where it starts to sort of go off the handles a little bit comedy wise. And it's weird. I'm not sure I would categorize it as a comedy, but it's definitely comedic. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And you know, sorry to break your heart, but okay, it's like Wes Anderson, those movies are definitely comedies. It's not necessarily my sense of humor. I enjoy them and I recognize the talent. Like Royal Tenenbaums that you mentioned, I really, really enjoyed that movie. But, I mean, I probably laughed about 5 times at the movie, which I think there's probably about like 50 actual like laughs. But it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Like, it's like the Todd Phillips, the Judd Apatow, the Seth MacFarlane, like those like
See, and
really get me.
I'm more of a
Uh,
cerebral comedy, right? Like I was
yeah,
howling during Royal Tenenbaums. Like the silent moments
yeah,
make me laugh, and I could relate to. My dad was a little like royal, and I had a lot of cousins that sort of fit into the. I have twin brother cousins, so I could kind of see them as as the twins and that kind of stuff, and so I could relate a lot to it. But yeah, I mean, again, comedy is subjective, so I think different things work for different people.
yeah, definitely,
But also
100%.
Superbad. I
Yeah,
mean, I thought Superbad was really funny. I like Superbad. I know some of the Apatow stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love Superbad. That's definitely one of my favorites. Yeah. But yeah, just starting to wrap things up. A couple of questions I ask all my guests. Number one, what gives you optimism for the future of the film industry?
There's a lot to be pessimistic about right now.
Yes.
I mean, I guess I would say there is some solace to be taken in the idea that it's always changing. And I think as human beings, we want to, we want to be able to relax. We want to be able to kind of be comfortable within. I know how this works. I know where this is going. I know how to do this. And,
yeah,
just about the time that you, in anything in life, kind of get comfortable with how it is, then something changes, right? And so I think,
yeah,
I mean, a lot of my fellow pundits will sort of say, oh, we're in flux and everything's changing. Everything's been changing for 40 years. You know what I mean? Like it was changing.
definitely.
It was changing from the movies of the 50s and 60s to the 70s, right? When the Scorsese and all that, Coppola and the new Hollywood. Remember that term, new Hollywood. And then the movie stars really come back in the 80s and 90s with the Cruises and the, Hanks and Denzel and all that kind of stuff, Julia Roberts. And then, and I remember when VHS was going to destroy film, and laser discs,
right?
and then Blu-rays, and then cable television. Cable television was, when I was a kid, HBO is going to destroy. People aren't going to go to the movies if they can see it in their home. Well, no. And by the way, people have always watched films on television since the invention of television. Films have been watched on television.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
you've got that. And then obviously, I mean, I'm not going to act like streaming didn't disrupt the business, certainly, but you've always had disruptors. There's always been disruptors. So I take some solace in the fact that, it's changing and then it's going to change again and it's going to change again. It's going to change again. 20 years from now, we're beaming movies into our brain that we can watch with our eyes closed. I don't know, a hologram in my house. I don't know what it's going to be. I think that, and again, AI, that obviously a big discussion over the last couple of years with the strikes. I've done some fooling around with AI, and I think it can be a very useful tool. It is not a replacement to anything, but if it's used correctly, the same way, we went from Motorola or Moviola to Avid. You know what I mean? Like it's just a tool. So
yeah,
I'm not too worried about it. Yeah, the whole paradigm of how things work are going to change. How stars are made, who gets to make what movies, what actors are paid. I mean, all that stuff's going to flux around. But, I mean, since the invention of filmmaking, in many ways, it's never changed, right? It's a camera, pointed at something, you shoot, you've got some actors, you're telling a story, some music, you know what I mean? Like, that's never going to change. So, I mean, listen, I definitely see the death of broadcast television coming. I've seen that coming for a while. I think everything's going to be at an app sooner or later. I think everything's going to be a streaming channel sooner or later. Already I moved into where I'm living now a couple of years ago. I got rid of cable. I just watch apps.
Oh yeah, I haven't had cable.
I think that's the future. Yeah. Now my mom, who's in her 80s, she can't imagine not being able to watch local news on the local Channel 4 or whatever, And God bless them, not that we want to see anyone go, but I think as that generation moves away, our generation and your generation, my generation, your generation are going to start to adapt more to, so I definitely see television in a sense going away. Movie theaters could go away, or they could become more of a novelty kind of thing. We already see that happening a little bit.
I don't want to hear that.
I think a bigger question in the future is going to be, what's a movie, what's a TV show, right? Or, a TV show would be multiple episodes. What's a movie and what's a TV movie? That line's already pretty much disappeared. So, the fear I would have, and I, it breaks my heart too, the idea that the movie theater would go away. But I think that it's going to become a point where, and it's already basically become this, where it's going to be, you go to a movie theater for the next Avengers movie or the next, or an Oppenheimer, right? You'll go to see a Christopher Nolan movie or a Marvel movie. Not to get too much off the subject, but, one of the things I'm always saying is we don't have movie stars anymore. They don't exist. Even Tom Cruise, no one goes to see his movies if he's not in Mission Impossible or Top Gun.
Right.
There's a couple you can, even Will Smith, people only go to see his Bad Boy movies. So, I think the movie star is going to disappear. And what we've had replaced with it is the IP, right? So is it a Marvel movie? Is it a DC? Is it a Harry Potter? Is it a Fast and the Furious? Is it, Pixar? I think not that IP is going to go away, but as these IP, we've already seen the interest in Marvel waning, the interest, are we really going to be interested in another Jurassic Park trilogy? We'll see. But I think what is interesting and maybe a good sign, I'll leave it on this note, a good sign for filmmakers and filmmaking is I think the next wave, if you had movie star, IP, I think director. I think we're going to go back to a director. If you ask me who's the biggest, my definition of a movie star is a person that can sell a film worldwide based on their name and their name alone. Tom Cruise used to do that. Right. Julia Roberts used to, and I don't mean, not a Top Gun, not a Pretty Woman, but I mean, Vanilla Sky made $100 million. That would never happen today. I always say this, Rain Man opened in the summer of 1988, was the highest grossing film of the year and won Best Picture the following February. A movie about an autistic man. That would never happen today. And so I see the next wave being the filmmakers. We already see it. The idea that Christopher Nolan released a movie about Robert Oppenheimer that became, that not only won Best Picture, but made over $100 million. Tarantino, people went to see Once Upon a Time, maybe because of Leo and Brad Pitt. That didn't hurt. But because they want to see the new Tarantino movie. So that would be good for film if the next movie stars or filmmakers. That may or may not happen. I've only named two. There's only two I can name so far that are capable of doing that, but I hope...
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with...
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I totally did not mean to cut you off. No, I was going to say, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Sean Baker. M. Night Shyamalan has it on a lower scale right now.
We'll see what happens with Osgood. Spike Lee throw into that category, but it kind of goes back and forth, but it'll be interesting to see the next generation. You got Del Toro, You got Alfonso Cuarón.
Mhm.
I mean, there are I always say his name wrong. Inutro, Birdman, and The Revenant. Alexander. Anyways, you know what I'm talking about. That director. There are directors that Greta Gerwig. Greta Gerwig's a great. You know, it's a little heartbreaking. Narnia is going to Netflix, but I would love to see Greta Gerwig do another big movie, direct to theaters, and see what happens. Like, is there an interest for Greta Gerwig movies? I think there is, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah, I think so for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and then just wrapping things up, what are your top 5 comedy movies
all right,
of
I
all
love
time?
this. This is like Letterboxd. This is my chance to be on Letterboxd. Okay.
Yeah.
Should I go 5 to 1 or 1 to 5? Okay.
5 to 1.
Number 5 is Grosse Pointe Blank. Love Grosse Pointe Blank. I was a big it came out when I was in college. I was a big John Cusack fan. I remember it came out in college, and I loved the premise of the hitman comedy. And I went to see it opening night.
Yeah.
And it was sold out. This was back when movies sold out. And it sold out in theater. I went the following Saturday, and it was sold out again. Or there were limited seats, and my girlfriend at the time and I got in, but there were no 2 seats together. So we decided to leave.
Okay, yeah,
so
I've been there.
Third weekend, I still haven't seen this film. I'm dying to see. I went to a theater by myself. I was like, I don't want to do it, in the like a Sunday night at 10 o'clock, I knew no one would be there. And I love that movie. And it's one of those movies where I find a new joke every time I see the movie. Uh-huh. There are hidden jokes in that movie. There are hidden jokes that I pick up every time I see it. So Grosse Pointe Blank, and I mean, in the 90s, no one was cooler than Cusack. So I'll go with that. Number 4, Fletch, the original Fletch. Although I will just say, the John Hamm Fletch is actually pretty good. I actually like the John Hamm Fletch, but the Chevy Chase Fletch, that, and that mixed sort of everything that had comedy, the guy I knew from Saturday Night Live, and, this sort of cop detective, even though, he was a reporter, not a detective, but kind of had that element in it. Side note, similarly, I'll say Beverly Hills Cop, but I'll tie Beverly Hills Cop and Fletch at number 4. But because they mixed both things for me, right? They mixed the comedy and the sort of cop thing that I really enjoyed. Then let me go to number 3, Royal Tenenbaums. I won't. No more discussion needed there. We talked enough about that. Number 2, and this again is the sort of my action meets comedy. Midnight Run. And Charles Grodin. Clearly, that was the greatest thing he ever did. You know what I mean? Like, that's the role he's remembered for. Really should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor for that film. I mean, it's such a brilliant performance. But also, you go to Dennis Farina and some of the lines. I mean, and so many memorable lines in that movie. Fletch has many memorable lines too. But, using the whole fist stock, just so many great things in that one. But Midnight Run, Dennis Farina, I'm gonna slam this phone into your head, or have a Coke and a smile and shut up or whatever, just great stuff. And De Niro actually very funny in that movie too. So so Midnight Run
definitely got strong chops.
My absolute favorite comedy of all time is from 1979. You probably haven't
seen it.
I'm hoping you didn't see the remake, because the remake is awful. The original, The In-Laws, starring Peter Falk and Alan Arkin. They made.
Okay, someone actually. So another guest.
It's one of the great comedies of all time. I'm telling you, if you're a comedy fan, Benjamin, you got to see it. Do not watch the Albert Brooks, Michael Douglas, Ryan Reynolds remake, which has nothing to do. They just stole the title. It's awful. relationship between Peter Falk and Alan Arkin. And it's, it's really a screwball comedy. It's got a little element of because Peter Falk is maybe a CIA agent, maybe he's not. And their kids are marrying each other. Alan Arkin is sort of this nervous dentist guy, and he gets caught up in this, kind of caper with Peter Falk. So many, again, amazing lines. There's this one great scene where Peter Falk, it's a chase sequence in Mexico, and Peter Falk's driving. Alan Arkin, at this point in the movie, has just been through everything with him, and he can't take it anymore. He's losing his mind. He's being shot at. People are trying to kill him. Like, he's not built for this. And he's in the car with Peter Falk, and it's a car chase, and they're trying to escape. And to calm him down, Peter Falk's character says this line that I later realized was, Peter Falk improvised this on the set, but he's just like, Shelley, they make a sandwich down here in Mexico. It's a chicken sandwich. They put it on a hard roll. They heat it up. You ever try it? Oh, it's fantastic. You have it on a hard roll. You have it with a little coffee. I mean, there's just these, you ever have an orange juice? Just this like little banter back and forth. It's just so funny. And then there's I can't remember his name offhand, but there is a very famous character actor in the movie who plays a foreign dictator who has a puppet on his hand that he talks to. And it's so funny. And there's one scene in the movie where Peter Falk's character is he's kind of encouraging him with because he's a dictator that could kill them. He's trying to get him on his side. So he's sort of encouraging him with the puppet thing. He's putting up with the puppet thing. Where Alan Arkin's character is like, this is crazy. Like, what is happening? And so he's like, oh, isn't that cute, Shelley? Oh, the puppet. He goes, oh, the puppet's thirsty. So the puppet wants a glass of water. And Peter Falk says to Alan Arkin, oh, isn't that cute? The puppet wants a water. But the actor basically is just pouring water on his hand, right? The mouth isn't drinking the water. He's just... And Peter Falk gives this look of where he looks at the guy and then looks at Alan Arkin, and the look on his face is just like he realizes in that moment, oh, this guy's an idiot. And it's just like the perfect look on his... Anyways, so The In-Laws, absolutely my favorite comedy of all time, and third on my list of favorite movies of all time.
Okay. Right on. Yeah, no, that's so funny. My last guest, actually.
It really is considered one of the great comedies. And they were great together, Alan Arkin and Peter Falk, and just great chemistry. And they did a screening of it. I mean, this must be 10 years ago now. Alan Arkin was still alive, but he wasn't there. Peter Falk was passed. The woman that plays Alan Arkin's daughter in the movie was there, and a couple other actors, I think, to speak. But it was hosted by Kevin Pollak, the comedian, very famous for doing impressions of Alan Arkin and Peter Falk. And so I remember he did impressions during the screening. But it was the only time I ever saw the movie on the big screen. But it was great.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I love any opportunity I can get to
anyone ever ask you? I want to know what your 5 favorites are.
Yeah. So I don't think you're gonna like any of these movies, but let me see. I definitely have the list. Well, no, I think you'll at least really enjoy one of them. One of them's like very critically acclaimed. So number 5 would wait. Let me collect myself real quick. It's been a while since I've done this. Okay, I got him. Number 5, okay. Euro Trip. I don't know if... number 4 would be... let's see. I know what the 5 are. I'll put American Pie at number 4. Number 3... Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
That's a good one.
That's the one that Okay, yeah. Oh, okay. No, you already said you like this one. Superbad, number 2. Yeah. And then Wedding Crashers #1.
Well, I mean, listen, those are great comedies. They're all really, well-made comedies. So, yeah.
Okay.
I got no problem with that.
I didn't know.
With that.
Interesting. Okay. It just didn't. They don't seem like, based on what we've talked about, like your sense of humor.
I mean, but Richmond and a couple of them are, but yeah, but they're all. I mean, again, like I said, like I can recognize good filmmaking. So those are all.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was in one of them, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on, Jami. I really appreciate it. This was a really fun interview. There was a lot of many great stories.
Fun as well.
I really appreciate it.
Great meeting you, Benjamin, and thanks so much for having me. And keep doing this, man. This podcast is great. Keep going after it.
Thank you so much for the encouragement.